All right, I just want to do a quick comparison of some standing blocks. I've been seeing like a lot of controversy on Facebook about like these big kid blocks and that like Bondo Billy guy that uses those wooden blocks that he like makes himself. And I don't know if he runs them through a planer or whatever. I don't have one of those. I have a 2x4 here, which I'm not trying to make fun of the guy or anything, but he's just using a wooden block, which I think what he's just trying to say is basically you don't need anything fancy or expensive to be able to do good body work, which I think is a good, thing to try and tell people. I mean, you really don't. I think it's nice to have, a variety of blocks and have these fancy things. Uh, I also think for the price here for all of these is like less than $1,000. So if you're a DIYer that's doing body work, or even if you're a semi-professional, I don't think it's a bad investment to have all these blocks. If you're buying paint guns and stuff, if you're buying like a DeVilbiss or anything like that, you're already going to be spending quite a bit of money on paint guns and stuff. So they always say prep is the most important and the body work before. So I don't think it's a horrible idea to have these tools. And realistically, for the price, I think I would not regret buying any of these. And I think I'd still buy more. Uh, and I'd like to have more. I think the K blocks for a good starter kit, these are like $80 or like 100, less than $100 for this whole kit. Comes with a couple different lengths. I think 9-inch. What does this one say? 24-inch, which is roughly a 24-inch. It's the same size as that big kid block, and a 16-inch block, which they are hook and loop and sticky back, which is nice. It has a little aluminum. It has a little leather pad you can put on it to do sticky back or the hook and loop, which this has got the sticky back on it now, or you can peel these off and go straight to hook and loop, which I like having both. So I think this for a buy, great buy, great buy. Um, Pretty flexible. I think for doing larger panels, something with a contour on it, like this charger I've been working on. I use these initially for a lot of the charger. They're not super rigid, so I like them for putting in like that first initial rough in, skim coats and stuff like that, blocking it out. Just doing guide coat after the first prime, after stripping a panel down. I use these pretty much every time. Uh, these linear blocks, a little bit more pricey, the most expensive of the bunch. They were like a little less than $300, I think, for the starter kit, which they can get pretty pricey if you wanted to do the master kit. I think it's, you know, in the 4-digit range uh, for their full kit. So uh, they are super nice. I like them. They definitely make stuff super glassy, super flat looking. They come with a like wide variety of lengths and sizes. Their rigidity is pretty rigid, being the acrylic block. I think these K blocks have a plastic bottom on them, which is still pretty hard, still pretty flat. These are kind of determined by how many slits are in them and how flexible they are. Like you can get ones that have more slits in them or none at all, which will determine how flexible it is. These big kit blocks are basically determined on how thick the acrylic is, which isn't bad. The only thing I've heard bad about these is that the acrylic is so rigid that if you drop them, these knobs will break off or they will kind of crack, which if you bend them pretty far, especially on a cold day, uh, they do make a kind of a creaking noise, like a house falling down, which is a little scary, but I still like them a lot. Uh, I think you're gonna have a hard time breaking like one of these that's super thick acrylic. There's not much flexibility to this. It is wicked rigid. I think this is great for something like a bedside or something, like the top of this bedside here. Doing a big flat area. I think these are great. I like a lot how these big kit blocks have a wide variety of handles on them. I got these tubes as well, which I do like having these for like weird areas in between like a quarter panel and a roof line, like on this charger. Having something that has like a round, like the opposite of a bevel, I guess like a contour to it, to get in those odd areas. I like having a round block. I got these like little prisms that are pretty nice. It has like a little opposite to it that I think I was using on this cab yesterday. It has one more. There's a little prism one. There was one more that I had that hopefully isn't broken on the ground right now. Yeah, this little kind of butt plug looking one, which is super nice. I like having these like round ones for like doing like wet sanding and stuff in weird areas. I did drop it yesterday, and it looks like there's a little crack in it, or maybe it's just a. I think it's a crack, but I think that's to be expected with these hard plastics, like these linear blocks that are super, not super expensive, but they're the more pricey of the bunch. And I had these like 2 days, and I dropped something on it, or I dropped it, and it cracked. So I think that just good rule of thumb is just to try to be careful with them, just like any other tool. I don't think you'd want to drop like your DeVilbiss spray gun on the ground. Uh, so I guess it's the same premise. I get like having like a piece of wood, you know what I mean? If you drop it, like it's not a huge concern. It would definitely indent it. So I'm not sure. I think, for something more versatile and not to worry about it, these K blocks are pretty nice. They're pretty fat grip. They got a hog of a grip on them, and they're flexible. They still have a hard, rigid bottom. And for the price, I think these are a great starter kit block set. Like you can still get like these like O'Reilly's, like super cheap ones. They're way too flexible, I think, for uh, doing like really fine flat work. But if you're doing like a quarter panel patch or something like that, and you're just a beginner, buying one of these like $10 blocks, you're gonna get by with it. It's all sticky back, super cheap. It definitely work. The Durablock stuff I do like. It's like that hard rigid foam. I use these more for wet sanding. I got like a little bit more rigid one right here. It's a round one that I tend to use on like that quarter panel to roof line, which I've actually been using this one on that charger recently. Um, but I think in terms of price, I think they're all good for the money. I think in terms of like quality, I think they're all high quality. They're all worth the money. Uh, I mean, just in terms of feel, like if you're a person like me that has a problem with sanding too long and your hands start to kill you, it's nice to have a variety of blocks that will kind of allow you to switch up the feel, which I really like about these big kid blocks. It like has this, finger grip style, which is still super rigid, but I like having, these knobs actually don't feel terrible in the hand, especially if they're more rigid. You're gonna have just a fine time, you know, getting after it, sanding. Uh, you're not gonna have any problem like bending this one or worried about having too much pressure in any area. I would like to see how they work with doing these a little bit more flexible ones. I think they're still going to be nice. I'd like to get a little bit longer one and test that out and see how I feel about it. Uh, I don't mind the linear block grip. It's a little funky with the slits in it and bending it. Uh, they are still super rigid, so if you're trying to bend on a big curve, maybe not on a cold day, these would be a great idea to use. I would probably stick to like these K blocks. They're a lot more flexible if you're trying to do like a big curved area. I don't know really if the pressure will be the same on the center of like a big curved area, because that's like the biggest concern really. If you're more of a novice, I think the biggest thing to learn with bodywork is that the more you do it and the more you feel it out, just the more you're gonna understand and see what you're doing, and you're just gonna get an eye and a feel for bodywork where you can tell that you're either really flattening something out or if you're just kind of wasting your time, and things still just look inconsistent. But I don't think any of these are going to be a surefire way to get you a perfect straight edge. I think a lot of it with this controversy of like which block is better is a little ridiculous. I think it's time and knowledge and consistency with bodywork, just like anything else, that's really going to prove whether or not your bodywork's going to come out perfect or not. I think I like them all. In terms of feel, I think is the biggest thing. Uh, just in sanding, like I said, it's gonna be hard for you if your hands kill you sanding all day to do, you know, a ton of skim, like if you skim coat a whole bedside or something and you want to sand this whole thing down, especially if you're not using a ton of tools, like air tools or anything, which I tend to use an air file quite a bit. I'll grab the air file, which if you don't have an air file and you're doing body work, I would highly suggest getting one of these. They're like $100. They don't oscillate; they just go back and forth. But for something, if you're roughing in like a skim coat or something, of course it doesn't roll or have any bend to it, but it will 100% flatten out an area. Great for skim coats. I think it's a great tool. I use this a lot. It will kill your hand after a while, but I don't really tend to use DAs as much anymore. I tend to try and block stuff out as much as I can. And I just like having a variety of blocks. Like, I really can't say it enough how much I like how they have this variety of, grips and stuff through these big kid blocks. I think this finger feel one, it feels great. They have ones that are the style like the linear blocks, where they have that round style. And the big kid blocks with the knobs, like I said, it's a little different, but like, I don't know if you want to grip it like sideways, or if you want to go straight down. This one is super rigid, so something with a contour like this isn't exactly what you want to use, but I definitely still do like the feel and the grip on it. But like I said, if you're doing something super flat like this, you're not exactly going to want something this rigid, which is why it's nice to have something as flexible as these K blocks. I mean, the linear blocks are flexible enough, but these will, spread out an area more than these K blocks, just especially if you're doing these super rigid ones. You can get the ones that are a little less rigid, but it's super important to know when you're, reaching a super high spot. But again, you can see that there's still more pressure where my hands are. If you're putting too much down, that's still going to be an issue. So you really have to balance it out between, the right pressure where you're bending that contour, but you're also not putting too much in your hands when you have something this flexible. So then you start to see where you can get, this panel is wrecked, by the way, so don't mind all the highs and lows and everything that's wrong with it. But, using something a little bit more rigid like this, and always wear a mask. I'm just doing this for the video purpose, but something a little bit more rigid like this, even without putting too much pressure in, trying to give it a little contour. You can see that you're not hitting those edges as much. So, especially if you got something skim coated with something this rigid, you're really going to block down too flat, and it's going to be a little inconsistent unless you're really trying to move along the panel, which I think basically you can learn to do it with anything. But even these linear blocks have a decent bend to them, but I think it's all about feel. You can see where you're starting to hit these edges more. So I think they're all great blocks, and I think basically with like the controversy of which one's better, it's, I think, really just up to you which one I think feels best, and then how much time you put into learning how to sand and seeing what exactly is doing. Definitely get guide coat. If you don't get guide coat, you're doing body work, you can get it in different colors. And if you're not using guide coat, you can actually get chalk line, which is like for doing carpentry. It's the same stuff they put in a chalk line to snap a line for doing like framing and stuff, or anything really, drywall, whatever. You can get different color chalk line. You can put it in like a container like that. You can use like a sponge if you're trying to do budget stuff. You can literally get a sponge and some chalk line from Amazon. This was like $10 for this huge thing of chalk line, and it's basically the same thing. And you can have a way to at least check your work. But I think with the Bondo Billy stuff and the Big Kid block, huge controversy. I think what he's just trying to say is you can do great body work with basically anything, even a piece of wood, which I mean, yeah. When I was a kid, I used to use I did flooring a lot when I was a kid, and I had this vinyl that is a little bendy, uh, and I would literally use this stuff on big panels, and I would put paper on it, and I'd rip it down into like blocks. I mean, guys back in the day used to buy pieces of like Lexan and make their blocks out of it, and that was like the original way to make yourself a block. So I would take this stuff and rip it down and put some sticky back paper on it. I would use this as blocks, especially to make my own length for an odd size panel. So you really can do good body work with anything, as long as you are taking the time to do it and check your work. I think is the premise of what he's trying to get at. So let me know what you guys think. They're all great blocks. I think for the price, I would buy any one of them. If there's any other brands out there that I haven't heard of, or you guys want to comment and tell me to buy, if you want to see me do more stuff like this, I'd be happy to do so. I'm happy to have more variety of blocks. Yeah, just let me know what you guys think.